Baba Mesiah Daf Nun Amud Aleph, 3 lines down, continuing the concept of fraud. Ibrahim asks the question: according to Chachamim in the Mishnah, if the fraud is less than a sixth, does that mean automatically the guy gave up on it, he agrees to it, and he doesn't care, and therefore it's forgiven? Or does the same concept apply that the buyer has to complain about it within the time it takes to ask a merchant or a friend? If it's the amount of time that it takes to consult somebody, what's the difference in the case of a fraud or less than a fraud? 6 or less than 6. So maybe there is a difference. Maybe in the case of a sixth, it'll be he'll have the upper hand. If he wants a refund, he could refund. Or if he wants, he could keep the sale but demand a partial refund to return the fraud amount. But if it was less than a six, maybe the sale is stays and he has to return the amount. The difference, what's halacha? Teshman bringing a proof. The second case regarding the tagar of Lod, the merchants of Lod, they were happy originally when the Rabbi Rabbi Tarfon announced that they can have all they could defraud up to a third. 33% is considered fraud. And they said, oh wait, you could return all day. And they said, nah, we don't want it. So we said, so let's try to figure out what's going on. They thought that maybe under a third, 33%, according to Bitafon, is comparable to the case of less than a sixth, right? So Hamim said a sixth, which is 16%, less than a sixth is what we just mentioned now, the option you could pick what you want. And the same thing would apply to the Bitar who said 33%. So let's say 30% will be the same concept. Yeah, my Mishnah, that makes sense. Only if less than a six according to Chachamim, under 16% according to Chachamim, is referring to when the buyer has enough time to show a professional or a relative in order to claim a refund. But Bitafon has the entire day. That's why people didn't want to follow him. They ended up going to Chachamim. Because originally under Chachamim, if it was over a 6 or more, you can demand a full refund. When Rabbi Tavon said that you have until 33%, they were happy because now I could charge more without getting an auto refund. And now Rabbi Tavon got upset though that Rabbi Tavon said that they could claim a refund for the entire day. So if that's the case, that's why they said, we don't want to have to be on the hook for an entire day, whether or not we're giving a refund. So now that makes sense. But now if you're telling me that if it was less than a six Hamim, it's automatically forgiven. With Ritafon Nami, that means according to Ritafon as well. If it's less than 33%, it should also be forgiven automatically. Then why would they not want Rabbi Tarfon's method? Why would they want Hachamim's method? They would prefer Rabbi Tarfon. Because what Hachamim considered fraud was Rabbi Tarfon having a chilav. What Hamim considered fraud, yani from 16% to 32%, that would be automatically forgiven according to Rabbi Tarfon. So why would they not want it that way? So the Gemara says, do you think that less than a third according to Rabbi Tarfon, that can care about less than 6 Hamim? No. From 16% to 33% according to Bitafon. Kishtut atzma Rabbanan Dami, it's like 16% exactly according to Chachamim, which is Hachamim would consider that voidable completely, and Ritafon would say the buyer has the option. So Gemara says, so what was the point of them? What were they so happy with originally with the 33% of Ritafon? Maybe we could prove the fact that they got happy originally that according to Hachamim, when you can demand a refund is forever. But they came in the Amal then once Hachamim said that 16% to 33%, a sixth to a third is considered fraud, Samchu, they got happy. So now they could charge more. But then they said that they could refund all day. Azru, they were not happy. They said that because maybe if you're telling me that Hamim allowed you to have a time to check in with a relative or merchant, what were they happy about? I said no. They were happy with the amount itself. The sixth itself, according to Bitafon, forgiven automatically. But according to Chamim, it's considered fraud, and the guy can demand a refund. By the way, another question. If the guy is getting a refund according to Hachamim, the Olam Chazer, can you retract forever? Or is it also limited to the time of the merchant to ask a friend or a merchant, professional, his opinion? If you want to tell me it's only for a time to consult, my Ika Ben was 13 of 16 or 17%. Maybe there's a difference because the ill stood because 16% mishnit ana hazer, whoever got scammed can retract. If it was more than a sixth, shneim hazrin, they both can retract. What's halacha? They said, according to Chachamim, we know what we want Rabbi Chachamim, not Rabbi Tafon. Now it makes sense according to Hachamim that you can get a refund, which means within the amount of time it takes to get a consult. They have the entire day to get a refund. That's why they were able to retract. That's why they switched for Hachamim. They preferred Hachamim versus Ritafon. That they can always get a refund. Why would they want Hachamim versus Rabbi Tafon? Because he only gives 1 day and not longer. Hachamim say you have forever. So why wouldn't the Rabbi want Rabbi Tafon? Gemara said no. In Lod, they were professionals, and sorry, not that. An overcharge that the guy would end up wanting a refund is not common. Okay, it's if it's less than 16% valid and no refunds. If it's more than a sixth, refund, and anybody can demand a refund. If it's exactly 6%, a sixth or 16%, it's valid, but the guy can request a difference. That both of them is the amount of time to get a consult. The price for less than a sixth, it's good sale. If it's more than a sixth, that's void. It's exactly a six, it's good, but they get the partial refund. They were Natan, says, the seller, if he got scammed, has the upper hand. Either say give me back merchandise, or give me back what you scammed me. In both cases, either 16% or more, because you're limited to the amount of time to get to consult. Okay, next problem. How long do you have until to demand a refund? So the first opinion said that you haven't enough time to get a consult from a professional merchant or from a friend. That only applies to the buyer. But the seller can always retract because he doesn't have the merchandise anymore to show it. The buyer has the amount of time it takes. Okay, I got this. I'm gonna go home, show my cousin who knows this stuff, and ask him for his opinion. According to him, the Mishnah says that you returned. The merchants decide not to follow Rabbi Tafon, but they wanted to follow Rabbi the Hachamim. That makes sense according to the opinion that because then the seller can always retract and not really limit the time. That's why they were happy. Because now, if he was scammed, he didn't gain anything from Rabbi Tafon's extension. Only the buyers did. But if you're saying that the mocher is like the buyer, what's the difference? It should be good for them as well. They get the same extension, so why would they complain? The Gemara says, no, it was not common for them to make a mistake. So therefore, when they found out that the buyer got an extension of time to get a refund, they were unhappy. The landlord of Rimi Hamas sold wine and he made a mistake. He undercharged. Rami came by and he saw that his innkeeper or the landlord was upset. Why are you sad? I sold wine, I made a mistake. Go and retract the sale. I waited too long past the amount of time it takes to get a consult. He sent to the landlord and said, that only applies to the buyer, but since you sold it, you can always retract. My time, why? Because we said earlier, the buyer has his merchandise and therefore he can get a consult. Wherever he goes, he can show it and get an opinion. Tell him that I made a mistake. But the seller, he doesn't have the merchandise anymore to show anybody. He has to wait until he gets the same exact deal again. Then he'll know he made a mistake or not. Or did not. And therefore, the seller is given more leeway to demand a refund. There was a guy who bought silk ribbons to sell. He called out asking 6 as the price, but really they're worth 5. Knowingly that if they offered him 5.5, have a shakil who take it. He's doing businessman thing. After who a certain guy came along and said to himself, if I gave him 5.5, it'll be a good sale because the guy I'm forgiving half of it, that last Zuz. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna be a scammer. I'll give him the 6 what he wants. And then I'll charge him in Bedin for overcharging me. I said he says, the only time that you have the 1/6 limit that can demand the refund is only when you're buying from a merchant. But since you're buying from a guy who's selling it out of his house, regular balabait, there's no fraud because a guy's personal product, like we'll see later, is more important to him. There's a guy who's selling earrings. He was asking $60, but it was worth 50. Someone offered him 55, take it. Someone came along, same thing. If I give him 55, will be forgiven and it'll be a good sale. I'll give him the 60 and then sue him in court for overcharging me. That only applies to merchant, but since it's a household item, it's not a fraud. These rabbis agreed with the opinion. We have Mishnah. Our next Mishnah says that the same thing, the same way the price fraud applies to a regular person, same thing applies to a merchant. Sounds like a regular person is lavavai, sounds like a household. So we see that the household guys is susceptible to price fraud. Amar Rav Hizda, he says, no, that's talking about the garbage. He's selling shmatas. The guy doesn't have any affinity for it. Something that's his personal dear items, the akira which is dear to him, it's not worth to sell it. Unless he's making more cash, like an heirloom or something like that. So over here, since the guy's charging more than the market value, but because it's dear to him, he's able to do it. Okay. Baseball card collection. I don't know. Both the buyer and the seller can be charged with price fraud. The guy we just said price fraud applies to an ordinary person and a merchant. Rabbi just says does not apply to a merchant. What that means because that goes against everything we just said. Now whoever got scammed has the upper hand. Either he can say refund me completely or pay back the difference of the fraud. I already know the pasuk that you can't scam. The Brita says, the pasuk says, when you make a sale, don't scam. That only applies to the buyer. I know that you can't, even if the seller undercharged by accident, you have to refund him. He can't get scammed. Don't scam, don't buy. So that sounds like why need both cases? We didn't write both. Only mentioned the case of the seller. You might think Mishum de Kim because he knows his purchase. But the buyer doesn't know his purchase and he pays less. Maybe it's not because he's making a mistake. Maybe there's no problem of defrauding him. Therefore, you have to write the buyer as well. So you can't scam the buyer. I only mentioned the buyer that you can't defraud the seller because he's buying it. Whatever you bought, you have. The buyer who is losing, the seller who's losing, you sold, you lost. You're giving up you're giving up your item, which might be worth more down the road to take cash instead, which you might lose or spend elsewhere. Maybe you might think he's falling into his own pit, and therefore there's no such thing as fraud for him. There's both of them you can't defraud. Said there's no fraud for a merchant. So Umar says, because he's a merchant, there's no such thing as fraud. What does that mean? Referring to a broker who resells what he buys. That guy can't be frauded if he's a merchant because even if he's under charges, he doesn't get refund. Why? He knows exactly how much he bought it for because he just bought it 5 minutes ago. He's a broker. He must be he's mochelet. Why? Why is he undercharging? There's another opportunity to buy something else. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna sell this now. I want to cash out for cheaper, then I'll sue him for it afterward. I just want to buy something else. Ravashi says, what do you mean there's no price for a merchant? And beturat ona'a. doesn't have regular price fraud. Even a little bit less than the price fraud, he can withdraw. Any amount of price fraud, he can withdraw because this is parnasah, and we don't want him to lose money. Proof according to Rabbi Nachman, the first opinion. There's no price fraud for a merchant because he's an expert on what he bought, and therefore he must be mochel on it. Okay, whoever got scammed has the upper hand. Who's a Mishnah? Lord be Natan. It's not Rabbi Natan and not Rabbi Nasi. Neither Iram Natan if it's only according to Natan, but Tin Katani Natsa. Our Mishnah said if he wants to. Ubaraita Loktanetza, but Baraita did not say if he wants to. Right? In the Baraita, Rabbi Natan said that if it's exactly a sixth, he has to give it back. The difference. But the Mishnah says you give him the option of which one it is, whatever he wants. Our Mishnah is saying it's talking about a buyer. Baraita Tanai Mocher, but in the Baraita it's talking about a seller. So doesn't make who's our Tanai Mishnah? Siman Zav Rash. This Mishnah about fraud, I don't know who taught it. Rabbi says the Rabbi Natan is according to Rabbi Natan. And the Baraita also says if he wants, and he fixed the wording to make it make sense. Rabbi has a different opinion. Whatever he skipped in the Mishnah, he explained the Braita, right? So don't think that it didn't make sense because two different wording, opposite. He mentioned one, and he mentioned another in the next one because he forgot to say it or just didn't mention it. Maravashi, another opinion, you can also prove it by reading in our Mishnah. Because the Mishnah says both the buyer and the seller can be frauded. Then he goes to explain the buyer only. We see over here that he quote unquote forgot or just left out explaining the mocher, and that's why I had to bring you in the Braita. We could prove from here.